Hi, I'm Ben Collins. Welcome to Some Say, my podcast series, which is all about fascinating car stories. Now, as some of you may know, for many years I was the man in the white suit on Top Gear, and I was famous for not really saying very much at all. But in this series, I'll be interviewing some fascinating people from all over the world, from the worlds of cars and motorsport. In this first episode, I'm turning to my old buddies from Top Gear, legends in their own lifetime and their lunchtime. Richard Porter, the script editor, the original writer of the Top Gear series. Jim Wiseman, the original researcher, then producer and series producer of Top Gear. These boys were there at the very early stages, the primordial soup that made Top Gear so famous all around the world. So, boys.
Hi, Ben.
It's great to see you again.
Hello. You too.
And thank you for coming to this cold hangar full of interesting cars.
Yeah. The male menopause behind us. It's wonderful.
You don't like Porsches, do you?
You don't like
So
that.
this is not exactly, this is like a kryptonite
essentially,
for you.
women have HRT, men have 911s. That's how I think it works. That's how it works.
It does.
So it's fantastic to be into this glorious drop-in centre for such.
I mean, this is where I bring my car. It's Cameron Sports Cars. They're actually a really highly professional outfit for tuning your car, getting it repaired and serviced. They do have some nice things.
Yeah, there's an Escort RS Turbo next door.
Yes.
Yeah,
which is
spotted
really
that.
good.
And the convertible Golf, the original.
Superb.
Is that Mark 1 or 2? You would know the difference.
It's a
Mark
one, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Excellent.
Ben, there, pushing invisible glasses up,
yeah.
wasn't a Mark II Golf convertible. you see.
Yes.
You are still the walking encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to automotive stuff.
You're very kind.
There's little you don't know.
A bore would be a way that some people would describe it, but yeah, I'm still quite interested in cars.
You'd have it out with him though about the whole Porsche thing. So why do you have a problem?
I only really have a problem with the 911 only because it signifies for me some of the worst in male behaviour.
So you've got a people problem.
I've got a people problem with it, and I was just saying earlier we did straight into the Top Gear thing. I hadn't driven one, but I had my opinion about it, and then I had to drive one to the Isle of Man, and I drove it, and I was like, oh bollocks, it's brilliant.
Yeah. So,
but this is the first time I've ever confessed to that.
I've never heard you say that. You kept that quiet. Oh, bloody thing.
Yeah.
Because one of my other jobs is I write for Evo magazine, and more often than not, if there's an Evo car of the year, which they do annually, and there's a 911 in it, it usually wins. And then people write in and go, "Ooh, another envelope full of cash arrived from Stuttgart, I guess." And it's like, you go, no,
not that big, small one.
So
they're really good.
Yeah.
They're just really good.
you got the letter there.
And they've got seats in the back. See, it's more practical. So like the Porsche versus Ferrari debates, where would you go on that for practicality purposes?
I completely bought by Ferrari only because I went to Maranello once and you go, oh yeah, it all makes sense.
Yeah. So you have no problem. You'd be there. You just park up outside work in your Ferrari.
I wouldn't have a red Ferrari or a yellow Ferrari. There's the Tour de France blue.
Yeah. Okay.
Always admire people who go non-red. Apparently, I was told by someone at Ferrari that typically when someone buys their first Ferrari, they usually go red with a cream interior, the classic cliche, if you like. And it's second Ferrari syndrome is when you go, oh, they do other colours, like that beautiful.
Oh, clever.
Yeah.
So they keep those tucked away.
Yeah. So they do loads of colours. You can have a Ferrari in pretty much anything you want, but most people go red. And
Why would you go yellow?
Well, it's nice. I think the yellow is nice. Gial or Fly is their sort of
Okay.
classic. Yeah, it's really, I think it's a good
Never
colour.
heard anyone say that before.
Yeah. But I think if you go on Lamborghini, then it's okay because you're like, hey. Anyway, aren't you? You're making that statement piece.
You are double downing though.
You're double downing on the revvy.
Yeah.
Outside.
Yeah.
You
outside you get the slow clap, don't you? If you're revving your engine in the car park, a little bit like that.
Lamborghinis don't really do it for me. I'd say my favourite car in the whole world is a Porsche.
Yeah.
Basically one of those, but the 997 GT3, but the RS one is just perfection for me.
But the Lamborghini Miura pisses on all of them, doesn't it?
But you see, I could drive the 911 every day, I reckon.
So your favourite is the GT3 RS?
Yes.
Have you tried the GT2 RS?
Not in that shape, but I have in the 991 shape.
Yeah. That is, I think.
So what do all these numbers mean? Right, let's just clear this up for the people. Obviously, a lot of people watching will know all the numbers. That's when like Charlie Brown, the teacher in Charlie Brown, when 911 people start doing that. That's when
999.
Yeah, is it? and I'm rah, rah, that's all I hear. And then it's like, I'll be on to watches in a minute, and then we can move on.
But you normally remember the good-looking ones, the 930 and the 964.
Can I just say, just for a bit of context for people at home as well as
sorry.
for you, that Jim and I are still very good friends, and we still have a little gang of us who used to work on Top Gear, people you'll know. We try and go out for dinner every so often, just to keep in touch, hang out.
Invited to these?
You've not been invited thus far.
Recently.
Sorry.
Well,
because you don't.
hang on a minute, is this the secret dinner club?
It's not that secret. I've just told you about it.
But
You can come to the next one.
I do want to go to the next one.
They're very haphazard. It's not like,
Yeah,
the main thing is trying to find time when everyone's free.
It's for Londoners though, isn't it? So,
Well, it is, but I'm down your neck of the
you
woods
come west now, so
yeah,
there's
maybe
no
we should start
excuse.
our own dinner club. Anyway, we meet up, and at the start of dinner, Jim will often invite some of us present to get the Porsche and watch chat out of the way so he can enjoy his evening.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's, and then it was a sea dweller, and then it's, actually, have you seen that 991 part around the corner? And
So is that the OG production team that gets together? So that was because there was
Pretty
5 of you at the
much,
beginning,
yeah.
wasn't there? You got Wilman, obviously,
Yeah.
Clarkson,
Yeah.
you two, Roland French,
French. That's it. That's the
Al
original
Renton
gang.
came later.
Came
a
later,
little bit later.
yeah.
So it's the micro team. But then there was
And that's the gang, and then Grant Wardrop
Yeah.
is part of our dining gang, but came a little bit later and produced a lot of the stuff that people will know. But I think, and it's not really said enough. Jim, I'm going to blow some smoke up your fundament, but I don't think it's said enough that Jim and Rowley in those early days were instrumental in setting the tone of the show, because I think Andy and Jeremy knew they wanted to do a car show that was a little bit different, set it in a studio, which hadn't really been done before. And beyond that, it was sort of white space. We didn't really know for sure.
Yeah.
And there were sort of certain things. And so it was the studio, they'd got that idea. And the Stig, I think Jeremy came up with that quite early doors.
Yeah.
It was going to be the GIMP, wasn't it?
It was going to be the GIMP.
Perry McCarthy put a stop to that. Good man.
Well,
no.
the BBC
did, yeah.
They
Did they?
went, the GIMP, isn't that sex slave
it's
of Pulp
slave,
Fiction?
yeah.
A little bit
You
strange. Niche.
Can't call a mainstream TV character that. And so I remember, because we went to a restaurant one evening, Jeremy, Andy and Gary Hunter, our original exec producer, and me, and one of the topics to discuss was, what are we going to call the GIMP, because we're not allowed to call him the GIMP. And with a mouthful of steak, Jeremy went, hang on a sec, do you remember what they used to call new boys at our school? Because Jeremy and Andy went to school together, and they were called Stigs, and Jeremy said, let's call him a Stig. And that was it. And it sort of sounded right, because of course, it's like Stig
Someone you can pick
Blomqvist.
on.
Yeah, I always thought Stig Blomqvist, because I was
You thought
watching
Stig
the
Blom-
RAC
okay,
Rally.
yeah, I like
so
that
it's
more.
kind of like,
The meaning of Stig, the word apparently, is pilgrim, which I think I
it?
prefer to both of those.
I didn't know that.
Maybe
wow,
a
that's
bit
cool.
of exaggeration possibly, but
So in the early days, it was like it was kind of, and there was so much sort of floundering about, I think, wasn't there? Oh God, what are we going to do? And I remember at one point I went to the pub with Jeremy and Andy, and as we left, Jeremy'd had this offer from Channel 5, I think, to go and join Fifth Gear maybe, but I think they'd offered him quite a big check.
because this was after the first death of Top Gear and the revolution.
Yeah.
There was a
Top
gap in
Gear,
between.
yeah.
Clarkson had done
Pause.
Motor World, I think.
In the 90s, yeah, but then he'd left Top Gear, which Motor
right.
World was made out of the same office
Yeah.
in Birmingham.
because I made tea on his chat show. So he did like a chat show, which isn't really remembered. So I worked on
it wasn't
that.
very good.
Oh, it was adequate. And so it
I mean, the tea making was superb.
yeah,
world
some of
class,
the
but
tea was I got some good reviews.
So this is how you got into telly?
Yeah, so I started as a runner, which is based, but weirdly now, a showrunner is like the top job.
Yeah,
it's
confusing,
weird,
isn't it?
which has come from America, I think. But back in the day, just a
T-boy.
couple of decades ago now, it was T-Boy was the runner. So I did that, and and Jeremy had left Top Gear, I think, to do.
But you'd worked in food and beverages before.
I had, yes, at the cinema.
Yeah.
So
That's how you got the
That's
big
how I
break
got
on
an
television.
unfair start on other TV.
You see the big
makers.
screen, you
Yeah.
were there shuffling popcorn and Coca-Cola.
Yeah, that was my job whilst I got turned down for hundreds of jobs in TV.
Yeah.
So I continued to do the ice cream that no one wanted before the film started. And then I worked at an edit facility and then just started bumping into people there and getting jobs.
But you knew where you wanted to go, so that's...
Yeah, but day 2 at the edit thing, I was like, oh, this isn't the bit I want to do.
Right.
So then and then eventually I got a couple of runners' job on game shows, and then I got a runner on the Clarkson chat show. But he'd left Scurry, going back to the original thing, was he'd left Top Gear at that point.
Yeah.
And I remember Andy Wilman coming in. Andy worked on it, and Andy Wilman came in, and I was like, oh, that's the bloke from Top Gear, because he used to present on old Top Gear. And he came in, and this is quite funny, because he's quite a sweary person. So I was like, oh, it's the man from Top Gear swearing.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard him swear before.
I had that when I first met Quentin Wilson.
Yes.
Is that a name drop?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a name drop,
can't
but
pick that up.
I worked with him, so I worked on Old Top Gear. And he was the first of the on-screen talent that I met. He came in the office one day for a meeting, and we sat in this room, and he went, I mean, it's just fucking stupid, isn't it? Just about something. I was like,
He swore.
man off the TV.
With his posh voice.
Swear word, I know. And it's so weird.
yeah.
Shortly after that, I was walking down the corridor at BBC Pebble Mill, and coming towards me
With your mind shattered.
Well, yeah, I was in
Yeah.
pieces. I just didn't know what to make of the world.
Yeah, were
anymore.
you off your food? Yeah.
I was very peaky at that point because I just couldn't recover. But then, just to really shake my world off its axis, I was walking down the corridor. Coming towards me was the lovely Sarah Green off
Superb.
off Kids TV, off Blue Peter in the 80s.
Didn't watch
Going
much
Live.
Blue Peter, if
Live.
I'm honest. But
And
Oh, sorry, I noticed on the internet, so if you just Google Going Live and 5-star, you'll see the greatest moment in television with Sarah Green. Anyway,
check that out.
Yeah, check it out.
but Sarah Green, doyen of 80s Kids TV.
Right.
And, obviously because of that, not someone you'd expect to swear. And she was with somebody, I guess she was working
Sarah
with.
Green swore.
As they walked past me, Pebble Mill used to have these big floor-to-ceiling windows on the downstairs corridors, and she sort of looked outside and she went, oh no, it's pissing it down.
yeah, that's rough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I just fell to the floor, that was it.
Yeah.
Sarah Green said
Game
pissing it
over.
down. I didn't know what to think anymore.
I had the same thing with Joanna Lumley when I was coaching her in the reasonably priced car, and say, do something, and she gets something wrong in the car, she'd just go, fuck, fuck, and she wouldn't stop saying it. She just stuck with that one word. That was her one word for the whole lap.
She said it so beautifully that.
She did. It was so polite.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, darling.
Sweary celebs are brilliant.
Yeah.
Where were we? Oh yeah, I was going to say, so in the early days,
Yes.
Top Gear had been paused. Jeremy had left, show soldiered on for a bit, show paused. Jeremy he'd had this idea with Andy to do a sort of reinvented car show, which was it going to be called Carmageddon or something?
Yeah, it was studio based. All I remember is getting a document that was studio, and there was bits from the chat show, I seem to remember, because I had to go for this interview. Were you interviewed? Well, you kind of got it.
Sort of,
Yeah.
no, it was a bit of an inside job.
I had to go for this interview, and I got this sheet of, we're doing this. Beat the Speed camera was on there, which was actually
Was
the
it?
first VT I ever worked on. That was with Perry before you came along. Great guy. Anyway,
guy.
so
the best.
Oh
Stig.
man,
driving.
it's like Sean Connery, It's like
Sublime.
the original is often
Yeah.
the best. But anyway, I got taken up to be interviewed. The PA was taking me up there, so I said, "Oh, how many people were you interviewing?" And she was like, "Oh, we've had 10 today, and we've been doing 10 a day for 2 weeks." I'm like,
Great, no chance.
"Oh." So I went for policy of shit or bust. So I kind of did impressions of Jeremy. I said, you've got to get presenters to take the piss out of him. And just went completely, it's all or nothing.
You let Jim out?
And I got it. I had a wonderful 25th birthday, which now ages me. But so England beat Argentina in the World Cup. You remember, Beckham penalty.
Yep.
And literally after the final whistle, Andy rang me and offered me the job, which
Awesome.
was like a dream job, because I'm sure you as well, we all watched it as kids with, Tiff, Quentin and Jeremy, and it was, Thursday night was that and Red Dwarf, and that was the making of the weekend. So I remember driving in my then girlfriend's Vauxhall Belmont, screaming the theme tune. Just
To Top
thinking,
Gear.
I've done it.
Yeah, nice touch.
Yeah.
A lot of velour in a Belmont, wasn't
Yeah,
it? So
when
probably
I went,
acoustically quite-
and a lot of
Or
dust
banging
came
the-
out of the
oh, yeah.
velour when I
Yeah,
banged
yeah.
the ceiling with delight.
Blowing the speakers.
Little did I know what I was in for.
I have no idea what that car
Life-defining.
is
Yeah.
or was, but it sounds.
It's an
Astra with a
Astra with a
boot
boot on
then.
the back.
Okay, yeah, nice.
yeah.
It's
It's
an
a
Astra with a
saloon
boot.
version of
So
the
it's like
Astra.
an estate almost.
Not an estate. No,
not
very
an
much a
estate, no.
saloon.
No, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Educated.
It's,
But your journey is different. You were folding shirts in Next, is that right? And
Yeah,
you
I
saw an
was-
advert.
I was I'm a bit older than Jim, so this was sort of mid '90s. I was folding shirts in Next, and
So we have this in common. I actually worked at the Gap also folding shirts
Well,
with
you
a
hated rival.
plastic folder thing, and you
Yes.
that's to make it
Really?
exactly the same
Don't
shape.
have those at the
this sort of
cinema.
perspex rectangle, and you lay it in the middle of, say, a jumper, and then
Yeah.
it allows you to evenly fold it.
That's how
Get
they
a
do it.
beautiful
Yeah.
thing. Yeah,
And I'd do it
love
all
that
day,
thing.
and then I'd stack them, and I was really pleased with the work. And then the lady would come and say, "No,
Yeah.
that's useless." And,
Oh,
and
really?
she'd take the whole thing and I'd do it again.
Wow.
And that was my motivation
A
to
bit
find
tough
different
again. I don't think I
employment.
ever got that. I mean,
The
I
next was a bit
then-
easier going, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't so much like being on the shop floor as much as then I got sort of put in charge of the stock room, and I quite liked that because I this is still a highlight of my career, is that I reorganised the stock room at Next in Wilmslow where I worked.
Nice.
And I did such a good job that the area manager asked me to go to Next in, I think, Ashton under Lyme nearby.
That's a big move.
To give their stockroom person some guidance on how to best reorganise it. And I spent a day there like a troubleshooter, being parachuted in, and I was a bit like, "Ooh, this is an interesting side." I actually applied for a job at the regional office in Manchester because for a brief moment I went, "I'm never going to
Bigger
get a
stock
job."
room.
Yeah. I'm
Bigger
good at
stock
this.
room.
Did you
Beautiful
just
stock
at
room
that
in
point
some
you
of
must
those
have thought,
big stores.
I'm good at this.
Well, I just
I've got
thought,
this.
yeah, it was kind of.
Folding.
I'll be honest, I quite liked just particularly being in the stock room because you didn't have to speak to people.
Yeah.
They let me bring a radio in,
Oh, great.
but you could also just hang up shirts and daydream
Dance privately.
and dance privately, yeah, and
And
sing along.
is this normal training for a renowned author and successful scriptwriter?
Well, it's funny because I did used to daydream a lot and think up stuff, and then I used to send my friends. I would like write stuff on. We had a computer at home, so sort of kind of PC that people had.
Was it an Amstrad?
It was an Amstrad, and I would construct elaborate like fake newspaper cuttings and things like that of stuff I thought would amuse them, and then post it to them because
that's
it was
brilliant.
the 90s.
Yeah.
No email. And I would spend a long time like thinking of jokes to send to my mates who were sort of, had gone away to other parts of the country. Just because I had time on my hands.
So you worked on the material in your head in the stock room, and then
So
you went
in
home,
in your
typed it up,
wildest
and
dreams.
off it went.
Yes.
and then
say-
found someone who would eventually, I suppose, pay me to write this shit for,
That's
for a
awesome.
living.
In
But
your
it
wildest
was-
dreams, did you think one day I'll win Best Unscripted TV program?
I had my eye more on best stockroom in the next
Yeah.
empire, but so yeah, I was folding shirts, applying for jobs in sort of media generally, assuming I wasn't ever going to get anywhere, and I think I applied for a job at the next regional office because I was like, I might as well just stick with this. I'm in here now. I'm never going to work in telly or in magazines or whatever. And then I was watching Top Gear on a Thursday night, and it used to be half
Standard.
8, wasn't it? Half-hour show.
before Red
And
Dwarf.
the producer, John Bentley, who people might know now for the Gadget Show, but was also
The
a
tall, balding
presenter.
chap.
Not balding, no, he's got excellent hair,
He's
actually,
got
John.
brilliant wavy hair. Yeah,
Shock of grey hair. But,
I'm
he's
thinking
a
of the
guy
wrong
who talks
person
like
then.
that. John Bentley, hello,
Yeah,
yes, I
I don't know
do.
why I imagined him as a balding guy.
But he was also a presenter as well as the exec producer, and he just popped up on the show and went, "We're looking for researchers.
Yep.
Send in 3 ideas and a CV." And you're not supposed to advertise jobs like that at the BBC. He got a big bollocking for it, but it was too late. The word was out there. And I applied for a job and then didn't hear anything for months because, as it turns out, they got loads of applications because they advertised it on telly, and then finally got called in for an interview. I wore my best suit. I went to Birmingham, did my interview wearing the same tie as John Bentley. And then I went out with a friend of mine from university who lived in Birmingham, and I was so happy that the interview I thought had gone well that I drank quite a lot and didn't have any dinner, and then got back on the train up north.
You've got form for this, haven't you?
What, getting on
lots.
trains drunk? Yeah. Yes. But I was feeling quite queasy, but also giddy with excitement and adrenaline and everything. And as the train was pulling into Stoke-on-Trent, I had to put the window down, and I was sick onto the platform from a moving train, but wearing a suit and tie. So people were going, "Oh, look, that young man must have been on business to..." Oh my God! You see people sort of stepping back. So that was my day of my interview at Top Gear. And then again, there was a big pause. I didn't hear anything for ages, and I was like, well, I haven't got the job. But again, I think they were just processing.
Yeah,
they
the
had a lot of
pause.
people through.
I think that's standard procedure because
Yeah.
I had my interview meeting with Wilman, just
Yeah.
him at the track, to do the audition on the,
Yeah.
do a time thing with him. And he looked totally underwhelmed with everything that I did.
Standard.
That's just
He
Andy's
just-
face.
He'd sort of show me where it went, and then he was standing there with his baggy trousers and his bum showing, and the stopwatch, and I presumed from that he meant go. Then he said go, sort of did a lap, and he said, "Is that as fast as you can go?" And after a few goes, I said it was, and I said, "That's it." And he's like, "Okay," and just sort of pulled his trousers up, and now I was like, oh, great, so there's nothing going to happen there. And I think it was about 3 months later, and I think it was you you're the first one I met at the track.
Yeah.
It was either you or
like, I'm quoted in the book as like going, ooh, your book, as if going, whoa, like this, right? I want to put that straight.
About what?
About, whoa, you were there. So that's how I read it. It's like, so
I think I fact-checked that.
I just want to clear
in my mind.
What happened? What actually happened was we got chatting about the merits of Margaret Thatcher, and we were poles apart on that, right? And what my actual thought process was that man's politics is terrifying. However, my God, he can drive. So I just want to put that straight.
Okay.
Yeah. If you can do another
in the next edition, I'll put in the Wiseman
you
version. The canon of Wiseman.
This is so. I can't remember. By the time you became the Stig, were we still doing the full veil of secrecy? I think we were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had to suit up before you arrived at the track.
Yeah.
As far as I can remember.
You had the balaclava, didn't you?
Yeah, I used to drive in with the balaclava on.
Yeah.
I thought, right, we've got to last longer than Perry. Perry did 9 months, and I thought, if I can do
that, no,
yeah.
I don't think he did that long.
If I can do, if I can go 2 years,
great guy,
that would be great.
Yeah,
great guy,
met
great driver.
Really nice guy.
He is hilarious.
Always the original.
I kind of wish he had a podcast actually.
I'm surprised.
I think he does. It's better. It's got big numbers.
So yes, because Perry. Well, what happened with Perry wasn't it because he sort of wasn't super discreet about things sometimes. I think people in the motor racing world were going, Perry, are you the Stig? And he was like, no. I believe. Sorry, Perry, if that's not true. But
and he did the French. He did a French accent.
He did a French
Yes,
accent,
he did.
which was
great.
great.
I
thought the only way to go better than that is just don't talk to
it.
It was.
I remember that. Yeah. Because people go, oh, it's Alain Prost. It's Alain Prost. It's like, how could we afford Alain Prost?
Yeah.
Plus, also, he's clearly taller than Alain Prost.
He wasn't, though, really.
Well, a little bit.
I don't know.
But that's the thing. He used to come in because sometimes you'd have to. You remember, so if you'd driven a car and we wanted to know what it was like out on the track, we'd have to have a chat, so I could stick it in the script. But I remember going to Perry and going, so how was it out there, Perry? And he'd be like, well, I didn't know it was Perry. I genuinely didn't know it was Perry at that point. So I'd say, Stiggy, how was it? And he'd go, well, he's a little bit twitchy around the Chicago. And you'd be like, who is this guy? He's plainly not French, but I appreciate that he's really putting his all into the accent.
Yeah.
So,
I forgot about that. He did, yeah.
I did find out who it was. I can't remember how. And you already knew. And I remember watching him going round once on a really wet day, and you went, he is good in the wet, isn't he? And I was like, he's famously good in the wet. And we could never say his name, but we both knew that we knew.
We both, I was a Perry fan.
Because he was good in the wet.
I was
he's a great driver, Ben.
Yeah, he is. He's a great driver.
And a really nice guy, really good talker, very good public speaker.
Yeah.
Lived in his shadow.
Yeah.
Well, not really, because he's quite short, but...
I mean, I would say actually, Ben, I'll blow smoke up your ass now, but I thought you made the Stig because we always just thought he would drive the car. This was the whole point. He would only drive the car. And when we kind of realised that we could do more and have him out in the world, and we had you going on public transport in that race across London and stuff, but it only really worked because you were able to do that sort of. Because your successor...
I modelled it on Crocodile Dundee.
Yes.
What?
Well, that all makes sense.
Yeah.
When you got the knife
Crocodile
out on
Dundee,
that
when you came to the city, couldn't go down an escalator, all those
I
things.
see, yes.
Very good.
Yeah.
As opposed to, the boomerang and, all that
But there
stuff.
was there's an element of a sort of, a mime performance in it. And you had to sort of carry yourself in a certain way. And he had that kind of... Do you remember in the pilot of Top Gear, we had the Stig walk in? Still, it was because it was Perry, so it was the black suit.
No, it was someone else. Do you remember?
It was a guy. I won't say his name, but it was a bloke. It was just someone who worked.
Well, Richard Healey used to like putting the old suit on for the occasional
directors,
but
this guy, I think it was a guy at the magazine or something who was a similar build.
That's it. He was the reason he got the gig was because he was a similar build to Perry. Perry wasn't around. The original pilot of Top Gear had this huge set. It was in the round. It was this metal sort of frame, wasn't it? People could stand sort of on levels.
It was a tremendous waste of public money.
Thunderdome.
It was very, very
like
good.
Thunderdome.
It was like Thunderdome.
And it had this sort of gate that opened and cars could come into the stage in the middle. But then we wanted to reveal the Stig, so loads of dry ice, the gate goes back, and this guy from the magazine walks on like...
It was like...
And we were in the gallery, and I just remember...
Like this. It was just like, what are you doing?
Well, that's it, because our
What film had he watched?
I don't know,
because he went, he must have gone, channel my inner robot.
But we've
And
never
it's
said
just
the
like-
Stig's a robot. I mean, at this point,
Yeah.
we've just gone, he's a racing driver, but we don't want to hear him speak.
No.
Here he comes. And in the gallery, I remember Brian, our director, went, "What's he doing?" And we were like, "We don't know. Who told him to do that? Nobody." So he went, "Right, stop, cut.
Yeah.
Go back, do it again, but just walk normally."
Yeah.
And gate open.
And he came.
And
We can only conclude that he walks like a robot. That's the only.
I just remember Brian, the director, just going, "Tell him to stop walking like a fucking robot."
Brian, the studio director, was the best person to watch Top Gear with, because when I get my job done, then it was interview time. Go back in there and watch the unedited, full-throated interview with Jeremy and whoever it was, which would be like 40 minutes, wouldn't it? Edited to nothing. And Brian there, sort of shepherding people around. No, get rid of him, that ugly one. Get him out. Get him to the back. He's too hideous.
Yeah. That was.
Organise the crowd. Shout at the
There was a
camera.
lot of
old school behaviour.
corralling
Yeah.
members of the audience because you didn't want people who sort of stood there in a Subaru baseball cap like
Yes.
or chewing gum or
Oh,
something.
the
It's
chewers.
very distracting on camera
the
if someone in the
chewers
back of
got
shot
you.
is chewing, and
Yeah.
so we sort of have to kind of police for that sort of thing. And we did a very cruel thing in a way, in retrospect, because Jason Dorr was the original third presenter with Jeremy and Richard, and he was an ex-car dealer. And this is how much the show changed, because in that first series, and it carried on for more than that actually, there was a thing called Used News,
Yes.
which was a weekly update on the state of the used car market.
I'll be honest, the news was my most hated segment.
Was it?
Yeah, I didn't.
Do you
vibe
not
with
like it? That's good.
I loved. I enjoyed a lot of Top Gear, but the news part I did.
I used to produce it and I didn't like it.
I didn't mind the news.
I thought the news was all right. If the news went well, it was all right.
Get some gags. I was very tense watching the news because we'd do it in a way where we'd know what
I
they
thought
were
it was
gonna
there
say.
so that people could put the kettle on.
No, that was a celeb
That's
guest.
a celeb guest.
No.
Well, depending on your interest.
Yeah, it depended on the
Really?
guest as well. I think.
Okay, that's strong
Yeah.
words.
Well, I mean, you were watching because it was your bit, right?
I
Oh,
guess.
Stig's amazing.
Just fast forward
you know,
these
when
bits.
they were going,
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
yeah.
Talk about me, please.
Got the £10.
So Jason had to do this used news segment, or it was called used news, but actually he used to do so. Oh, and by the way, Renault are doing £500 off new Clios, and it was all that sort of stuff. Consumer journalism, very odd that we, I suppose because of a hangover of what Top Gear used to be, we didn't completely break
And this was in the informative stage still, before
Yeah,
we moved
yeah,
into
yeah.
pure
What
entertainment.
happens is we do the whole show and you have a celebrity guest and we have all
Yeah.
this stuff that people in the
Do it
audience would like to
last,
see. And we
yeah.
then, even though it came in the middle of the show, we would record it at the very last thing when the audience were
Shattered.
tired and bored. And then we'd make poor Jason stand up there and go, now, if you're interested in a Nissan Primera, they're currently doing interest-free finance. It was like
And it
people, people were visibly leaving in the
Yeah.
back of shot.
It
was
got the
so
nickname
rough.
Used Snooze,
Yeah.
I seem to remember.
Yeah.
There was a lot of tension though with that whole news thing, because on the day I remember the newspapers would come in on the day of recording. So
Yeah.
because you obviously have all these pre-recorded bits that you would assemble. Wilma would have his master plan once you were running this as a slick thing. But come the Wednesday
It was
for the
never really a
record,
slick
I don't
thing,
think
was
it was
it?
slick.
it was.
wasn't a word we'd
well,
used.
I thought it looked very slick
Right,
because you had your
editing.
VTs ready to go for the audience. Then your
Yeah.
lot would come in with the newspapers to check if there was something that was happening, and then you would disappear off to the presenter's green room, which I was not allowed into, and I was desperate to get in there
don't remember
because it
not being
seemed
allowed,
like
but-
the creative. Well, I'd get close to the door, and then I went through the door, and Wilman said, "Come on, you get out back." And I go back in, out, go on, piss
I
off.
suppose it was sort
Back
of
to your little room.
unspoken that people didn't come in, because what would happen is on a Wednesday, we would arrive sort of early-ish, and the presenters and Andy and me would go into that back room, which was disgusting, by the way. I mean,
Yeah.
you did
Yeah.
go in there, didn't you? There was
Horrible.
just
Yeah.
manky sofas, and birds used to get in when we weren't there somehow, and then poo all over the furniture. One of the most amazing things was when Michael Schumacher came on, and he came into the presenter's green room to say hi, and he was led in.
Got shooed out.
Yeah, get out, Schumacher.
Another Stig.
And but we invited him to sit down, and he looked at this sofa, and there was the remnants
risk
of where some
assessment.
bird poo had been scrubbed off it. There's this horrible stain on this horrible sofa. And you saw him, and obviously, he's a racing driver, very slender build and slim hipped, and he sort of managed to sit between the arm of the chair and the bird poo stain, but very precisely did that, so he didn't sit on it. Great posture, and he just sat there absolutely straight back, looking like he didn't want to be there at all. Mm-hmm. And then he went on the show and he absolutely aced it.
He did, he nailed it. Surreal moment, meeting him, just such a legend, and being in this motorhome while he had his cornflakes. and discussing go-karting, and he was racing bikes, I
you?
think, at the time. But really interesting guy, but just such a purebred passion he had.
Yeah.
I mean, it was in that funny moment when he just stopped before he went back to Mercedes.
Yeah, yeah.
But you could see he wished he was already wishing he was back in the saddle.
Yeah.
Were you part of that conversation? I think Wilman told me about this, that he was standing there with Schumacher, waiting for the cameras to get set in the car or something. And Schumacher just went, "Have you ever had an F1 car around this track?" And Andy said, "Yeah, we have actually." "Oh, what was it?" And he said, "It was a 2004 Renault." And Schumacher went, "Oh, what time did it do?" And Andy said, "What was it, 59? I think he did 59.2 or something like that." And Schumacher had already driven the track, so he got a feel for it, and he went, 59.2. Was it wet but with a drying line?
Yeah.
And Andy went, "Yeah, it was." It's just like, oh my God, the brain that can do that.
Yeah.
Take in all that data and immediately go, okay, 2004, yeah, okay, right, I reckon, yeah.
I knew he left with a high impression of me because I had to lead him around. He had the Ferrari, what was it? The FX? What was it?
FXX, was it?
FXX, some crazy thing. His personal car, beautiful, immaculate, and he had a team of 10 Ferrari guys there looking after it. It was absolutely spotless. And I had a diesel Jag to show him the track, and they sent me out. So we were both stigged up and going around. And I was slightly in awe still, and I was looking in the mirror, staring at the beautiful car as I went through Gambon and famously dropped 2 wheels off onto the gravel, which then just went straight up in a plume across his car. And I just saw him just go like this, and I could almost hear him screaming that word we were talking about earlier that we won't use, but yeah, fairly certain he logged that, or the German version.
Oh, that's great.
I presume no photograph exists of this, of 2 Stigs lapping the track.
I was going to say that would
an amazing shot.
It was odd. And then the porter cabin, we bumped into each other fully togged up. And the universe had a little shudder, and then he went off and did his great stuff.
I liked Vettel because I think, well, you would know this, but I think you told me that he went out, because the standard form, wasn't it? You went out with whoever it was, celeb, whether it was a racing driver or not, just to show them the track, give them a few little pointers, and then come back in, you'd get out and they'd go off and start lapping. And was it right that Vettel was the only F1 driver who did a few laps on his own, came back in and went, "Can you get back in the car with me? I've got some questions."
I think Vettel was after I left.
Oh, okay. The other guy.
Oh, he was good, wasn't
He
he?
was the other guy.
I'll tell you what.
We'll get into that in a minute.
The third one was fantastic, wasn't
Third
it?
one.
What a
Stig the
talent.
third.
Well, so,
He's not though, is he? Because we're 13 years on, and my time is still at the top of the leaderboard. 1 minute 10.6.
Said the racing driver.
Caparo.
Don't wipe the floor with it.
Caparo, it's road legal. They've had
okay.
12 years to nibble at that time, and still unbeaten.
I don't remember any of the F1 drivers actually being sort of super ego-y. I think they were all...
No, they were all pretty good.
Hamilton was great. He was so excited to be there.
It was
Do
a
you
very
remember that?
un-F1 day for them.
The most dangerous was Hamilton. Because the track with him was slightly damp in places, although I was trying to work, because his times are so quick. Most of the track was dry, but it was almost like the damp bits were cooling the tyres, because the issue with that car is it would get hot very quickly. The tyres wouldn't stand it. And you get about 3 laps. It was like a qualifying run in, 1980s qualifying time, but with a Suzuki with 90 horsepower. But he was extremely quick, and but just didn't beat the record. But Vettel, apparently, my spies told me, he's the only one that brought his spies.
Oh my God.
He's the only one that brought a tyre pressure gauge with him. So he went around the car, which was badly maintained. It was always, no one knew any stage of it. You'd see the same clumps of mud would be there from when Lionel Richie had gone off, wheel fell off.
Yeah.
And he equalled the pressures, and off he went.
So Jensen asked us to take pressure out to make it more rear-wheel drive-like, which would be pressure out of the rears.
So it just
Don't know.
moved around
So
a
it
little
moved
bit.
around a bit more, and we had to knock that one on the head.
Yeah, it
That
didn't
was,
help.
I think in your early days, actually was this, you remember that Koenigsegg which you had a little moment in?
Yeah.
But did you not, I seem to remember that you got in that car, went out, came back in and went, the left rear's a little bit down on pressure. And the
So that's the sort of thing I'd say.
It does sound like it was one of your signature
Could have
moves.
been. Are you sure it wasn't Perry? Because he'd have picked it.
Actually, yeah, Perry would have got, well, Perry just looked at the tyre.
Yeah.
Because he's that
He
good.
wouldn't have even had to go on out in it.
Yeah.
Actually, I had to say to him, I said, look, the brakes are soft, and I'm having to pump the pedal up. And he said, are you sure you're right with this? I'm fine with it, but I'm telling you, in case I end up ploughing the field, if I get brake failure, I just want it to, I didn't just do something stupid. Also, then the power steering was a bit iffy. And it was the power steering that went through when I was sliding it, carelessly
So
through.
it wasn't your fault. That's what you're saying.
I mean, it wouldn't have happened if it had been tuned slightly differently, no. And also, obviously, with the wing on, it was that much faster.
Tire, like it looked like a shark. It had eaten the tyre.
Yeah, we couldn't get the
I
thing
got
out.
a picture of that on my Nokia. That's how long ago that was.
It was embarrassing because the tyre wouldn't come out of the mouth of the car.
Yes,
And Christian von Koenigsegg was brought up in the ambulance.
Yeah.
You know, the ambulance. And I thought, shit, I
With
might need this ambulance because he's big, strong guy. Actually, he's a lovable bear, really.
Yeah, that was my worst day ever because he came back. They put a wing on it.
Oh yeah.
And I
Lowered the car.
I was on the stopwatch.
Yep.
And I misread the time and I thought he got the record and I was excited for him and I wanted to be his friend because he looks like a Bond villain. And then I had to go back and go, excuse me, sorry. I misread
He was
the
literally
time and
high-fiving
it was an
strangers.
8, not a 6, a point whatever. And he just was like, because he brought everything over from, where are they from? Sweden.
Yeah.
And
The track had closed and he told him he was fastest
Yeah.
and then
And then I
actually
had to
shattered
go
his
back.
dream. Said you're 2/10 slower
yeah,
than the
so it
record.
goes second on the board.
There's no time to do it.
So they came back a third time and we knocked off half a second, which was happy days.
I like the
That
fact
was the other guy, it wasn't you, was it?
It was me.
Oh, right.
But the people from car companies and also the celebrities, I think, would sometimes look with puzzlement at the fact that the timing around the track that was then put on national television was just a bloke with a stopwatch, or a woman with a stopwatch sometimes.
It's hard to believe.
It wasn't,
No,
there were no lasers or
When
There
I
should
was
have been
doing
lasers.
it-
style
No, when I was
GPS.
doing it, I was spot on.
Oh yeah, I'm
Oh, yeah.
not questioning
I
your, but
was-
it's just it was quite low
in
tech.
your mind, but it's still your thumb, isn't it? I mean, there can be up to 2/10 in the thumb.
Yeah, but they kept the thumb very close to the button, so as soon as it crossed the line.
Yeah.
Also,
I knew how to jump your thumb off the line. You'd be like, Jim, and then you go.
No.
Throw a ball.
No, because we got the system. With
It
the
was a
with
good
the-
system.
with the Ted Rogers 3-2-1 age
Yeah.
people, with the 3-2-1s and you were away. Yeah,
There was something we were doing
foolproof.
once that with James May needed to go off the line on a 3-2-1 and kept making a total mess of it, and eventually went it's to our researcher
Should just go one.
who was doing it. But she was quite small, and he went, "It's your fingers. I can't see your fingers. They're too little," which is the best racing driver excuse I've ever heard.
But James is, because there's all these, the persona, what do you see actually with James, what you get? In fact, I think it's quite similar with all three of them.
Yeah.
But he was phenomenal for getting lost and
Yeah.
not following instructions.
yeah.
When we were in Mallorca, we had each of us, me and two other guys, we had a Range Rover each for each presenter, and I was looking after James, and all he had to do was follow the Range Rover, which had a whacking great camera, and Ian May leering over the side, sort of, and James just took off, and I had Phil Churchwood in the director, and he was like, "Where the fuck's he going?"
Yeah.
I was like, "I don't know. Find him." I was like, "I can't on a dual carriageway now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's gone off to the coast with the Page 3 girl, I think, was it? Was she?
Yes, that's right. It's that rally thing, wasn't it? And they each had a
Yeah.
co-driver. That was,
Maybe
Yes.
he's not as crazy as he looks then, but off he went, and he was off, it was 40 minutes trying to find him.
Because I was on a shoot once where he, again, following the tracking Range Rover, and we were in Warwickshire near where Range Rovers are made and tested, and so there's a lot of Range Rovers on the road, and he came round a roundabout, saw a Range Rover, just followed it, and followed it all the way back to the Jaguar Land Rover headquarters. And we went, "James, the Range Rover you followed didn't have a camera poking out of the boot," and he was like, "Oh, I thought you'd finished filming and just closed it."
Nice touch.
Yeah.
No, so yeah, he went miles off. Yeah.
Amazing that he made it at all. I think you brought us neatly towards the FAQs I've taken from the interweb that commonly asked questions, Jim, about Top Gear.
Frequently asked questions.
frequently
Yeah,
asked
that would be
questions.
cack
So-
if it was commonly
Well,
asked.
some of them might be cack. I mean, this is the one I've been asked the most. I'm sure possibly the same, other than what's your favourite car, which we can get to as well. Paul from Stevenage and the rest of the known world asks, what's Jeremy Clarkson really like? Jim?
Thanks for putting me on the spot on that one. To the point where, and I'll briefly say it, I used to go out and I used to lie about what I did because I knew this question was coming. I used to say that I fitted Sky dishes when after, "Oh, you work in TV," or someone's like, "Oh, he works in TV." I was like, "Oh no, I can see the Porsche key ring. I can see the watch
Answer the
with
question.
the bezel."
Answer the question.
Okay,
Come on.
so
He's wriggling a bit, isn't he?
yeah. Shouty, but that's to be expected, obviously. I mean, he, like you were saying earlier, he's like an amped up version of himself. I would say that he's at points a toned down version of himself.
Well, I think on TV I think he's a turned up version of himself and a simplified version of himself. Because he's a very clever man, and he sometimes delights in playing an oath on TV because it's funny.
Yeah.
And he's very clever in that way, that he knows what makes good television, and sometimes that's him, with his trousers on fire.
Yeah.
And so he happily does it.
Yeah.
But when people ask, because they do ask, Jim's right. You're at a wedding or something, people go, "Oh, what's Jeremy really like?"
Yeah.
And I just go, "Well, he's like you see on television, but you have to accept sometimes that's exhausting."
Yeah.
I used to. One of my favourite things on a Wednesday when we do the studio at Top Gear was, I sort of used to, in my own head, it was called like the bollocks hour, because I think I wrote about it in my book, but it was where we'd arrive early, we'd do a read through the script.
Describe your book as bollocks.
Well, look at that.
What a great read. What a
haven't
great
read it,
read.
but I've
Available in
put
all good
some,
charity
I
shops.
put some notes in it so I could stroke it.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
But we'd have this lull between having read through the script, just sitting in the room with the horrible sofas, and then there'd be sometimes up to an hour before we were ready to go into the studio for rehearsal, and there'd be nothing to do except thumb through the newspapers and just
And
talk
shoo
shit.
you out the room.
Shoo you out of the room, and we just talk shite. And I think that when they're on form, there are no better people to just talk shite with.
They are.
They're very funny.
And that's what I wanted to say also. As much as it could be incredibly difficult in the workplace, as soon as it's switched to a social situation, you can hope for better company.
Well, I think, that's the thing. That's how you describe them, isn't it? They're good company.
Yeah.
But I think from your point of view, Jim, as well, because you're a researcher, so you were at the pointy end of and
The
Jeremy is
shouting.
a
And you needed it now
perfectionist
and more of it. And
Yeah,
all
I
those
mean,
things.
it's just
tough.
so it was just being knackered and shouted at. That's the other thing. Is like, what's it like to work on Top Gear? It's basically
tiring.
Being shattered the entire time, and
Unfed.
and then being shouted at. So my favourite of that was that American trip with the cow on that one, finding Jeremy's car, and I remember gently.
So let's put this back in perspective.
Yes,
this is
it's
when the
best
presenters wrote offensive slogans on
but
each
this
other's cars.
This was before,
Yeah.
so obviously
Okay.
myself and Grant Waldrop, who went out for 2 weeks to source the cars. And
Well, hang on, weren't you supposed to go out for a week?
I was meant to go for a week, so I had to. So this is the other. So the two things about being researcher, producer, person who sets these shoots up is you're knackered and you're constantly running out of pants. So this example is. You'll be there for a week, you're just helping Grant set it up. I ended up there being a month. So I'm like, okay, day 6, I'm meant to be going home. I've run out of pants. So what I'd always say to people who start is, don't worry about being tired and don't worry about buying pants. You'll have to buy a pack of at least 5 pants.
And then turn them
throughout
inside
the
out.
series. Yeah. And so,
Because I remember that in the office, because you'd gone out for a few days, and
Yeah.
it was just like find some car dealers
Yeah.
that we can film
Yeah.
that, because they had to
Yeah.
go and buy these
Yeah.
cars and all this stuff, and find the locations
Yeah.
and do the route, and it was going to be quite quick, and then
Yeah.
suddenly it was like, oh, we're having real
Yeah.
trouble here, there's problems,
Yeah.
and left, right and centre.
Yeah.
And I just remember someone in the office, I was like, is Jim ever coming back? And someone went, no, it's worse than that. He's had to buy pants.
Yeah.
It's like when you know someone's had to buy pants on a recce, that recce
came
is
back, I'd run
becoming...
out of socks when I came back, and my girlfriend picked me up, and I remember it went a bit quiet because I'd been away for ages, and it's obviously difficult to get. Sorry, I was only meant to be away a week, and I went away for 5. And then I had to run out of socks, so on the flight I was like, oh, fuck it, I'll just not wear any socks. I was in Miami. So she thought I'd taken the whole Miami Vice theme too seriously, but it wasn't. It was because I'd just run out of clothing. But on the first point of being knackered and shouted at, basically, I just remember getting Jeremy's car, and we got it out of a scrapyard, pushing the car that was 4 flat tyres. We just pushed in 100-degree heat in Miami, and I just remember fainting in installments, right? So I was pushing it, and I'm like, and then your world closes in. I was like, oh, I think I'm going here. So I'm like, so it's like Grant, who was with me, I think I'm going. By this point, I was on my knees. And then I just remember him like chucking some water on me, and I came to. And then it was the wrong car with the wrong wheels, and I got shouted at down the phone. So it's kind of like that in essence was the experience. And then of course you add to that, just as you're at breaking point, put on this white coat and give the guy, and you go, and then all your family ring you and go, oh, saw you on the telly. You looked a bit tired.
A bit grumpy. Why didn't you look happier?
You should smile a bit more when you do that.
So 5 weeks. I had no idea that you were prepping that long. 5 weeks, the Americans.
Well,
Well,
I
the
think
prep
so.
rolled into the shoot,
the
didn't it, I
prep
think?
rolled yeah, as I said, I was meant to be out there a week, and then we couldn't find the cars, because what you'd do is, and this is the game that Wilman would play, is you'd find one, and he'd go, no, it's not good enough. Okay, so we go, and we ended up, I'll never forget, we went to, so Miami-Dade is a bit funky, so we ended up there because we were looking for old police cars, and this guy had all the old police cars. So the police car was like this, maybe we'll buy a police car. So we went there, and he'd sold them all to Bad Boys 3 that had just been made the summer before, so we didn't have any police cars left. And we were like, are there any rough places we should steer clear of whilst we're over here? Like, hello, we're from England. And the guy was this black guy, and he just smiled, and he had gold teeth, and he just went, you're in it, baby. It was like superb. That was the perfect experience. And so, so these things turned into, and we got stopped for speed. Oh God, we got blagged our way out of that by being British, because we went from, because you recce the routes.
Doesn't always work, does it?
Yeah, you're trying to recce the routes. So we were doing Miami to New Orleans, so we did it 3 times to find, and that's a trek. So we were driving overnight and just putting a hammer down in our rental vehicle that we realised if we turned the aircon off, it would do 80. And we got woo,
the sports
and we got stopped and got flashlight and gun through the window. Like, so adventures certainly, but hard work is what I'd say.
Well, on that note. Actually, I've got something to show you next door that's relevant to the next segment, and also we might actually defrost our fingers because it's quite chilly.
It's a bit chilly, isn't it?
Yeah. So we want to take a walk, if that's all right with you guys.
We were discussing in the office, shenanigans, and whether it was like, oh, do we do some slogans and things like that? And then, as was customary, someone from the team, or 2 people from the team, went out there on a recce and came back and went, guys, it would be really bad to do shenanigans because feelings are still running very high out there.